Right. Hey, Jake, you're the first one here. It's good to see you. All right. I don't know if I'm going to wait. I don't know if I'm going to wait for more people, if I'm just going to start. All right. We got a few people. So, hello, Vesper Stamper. That doesn't sound like your real name. All right. Okay. Here we go. We got a few people coming in. All right. Jalbert, Josh Martin. Great. Vesper Stamper is your real name. That's an awesome name then. Doesn't seem like that's possible. Hippie parents. Vesper Stamper says hippie parents. That's pretty hilarious. As long as you don't stamp Vespers, though, because Vespers is important. So if you guys have noticed, my hair is wet. We are going through this massive heat wave, and so like I had to work in the workshop. Despite that, I don't have air conditioning, neither in my workshop, neither in my house, and so I'm just sweating all day like crazy. But anyways, we'll get through it. It's all good. But that's why I look so frazzled, I think. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start answering some of the questions that were asked on Patreon, and if we don't have a lot of people in the chat, I'll probably take a break in the Patreon questions and take some of your guys' question there. Jake, all right, my wife and kids. Jake says my wife and kids are watching with me. That means Jonathan, keep everything PG. All right, okay, so let's go. I'm gonna make a little window here, and all right, okay, so let's start with the first questions people have asked. All right. Okay, all right. Here we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through the questions that I see here. If I don't, I'm actually gonna read all the questions. It's possible that I won't answer all the questions. If there's something that I don't know, I won't hesitate to tell you that I don't have an answer or that I have to think about it. All right, okay. So Jeffrey Muter uh, asks, how do you feel about working so much more on computerized work instead of something you can touch and see with your hands like carving? Would the possibility of working full-time on YouTube or such work be problematic for your sanity? And the question is, yeah, I'm actually struggling. I'm actually struggling quite a bit. I think I love doing this. I love the videos. I love engaging with people, but I do find myself uh, spending a lot more time sitting at the computer, and it's not good for me. I'm better in terms of my own sanity in the workshop. I think that I love making the videos. What's kind of harder on my psyche is the whole, editing and then putting up the, you know, editing the podcasts and then reading YouTube comments and going through that. If I stay too long in front of the computer, it kind of drives me nuts. So hopefully what I hope to do is I hope that, what's been great about everybody's Patreon support is that I'm hiring someone to edit at least the movie videos, and hopefully as I have more room and I can figure things out, I might hire people to do more of that. And then on the carving side, I've got my son who's starting to work with me, and I'm also trying to maybe hire a friend to work with me part-time. And so that I can kind of do both at the same time. Hopefully I can use this extra money that I've been receiving to free up my schedule so that I can do this. So that's because there's no way, I realize there's no way that I'm just going to do computer stuff, because it's not good for me. All right. Okay. Can you comment? So Hamilton Provencia asks, can you comment about the Orthodox teaching about toll booths? Is it to be viewed strictly allegorically, or is there a tinge of reality in it? And if so, to what extent? All right. So for those who do not know, the toll booth is a more kind of esoteric aspect of Orthodox tradition, a lesser known and kind of maybe more obscure aspect, which is that when the soul dies, there is a kind of transition space. It's a between in the afterworld. There's like a transition space, and it's represented as this ascent and these toll booths. So the notion of the toll booth is that the soul, the soul ascends, and then at certain level the soul is checked for a sin, and if the soul cannot pass that sin, then it doesn't keep going up, right? So it gets stuck there. And so it's this idea that and so the sins go up, and the last one is pride. So you have these different passions, different sins, and then at the top is the last one. The last sin for which you are checked is pride. And usually the way that it's imaged is that there's an angel on one side and a demon on the other, and the angel is trying to kind of help you up and defending you, and the demon is accusing you, let's say, of your sins. Okay. And so you'll see, I did a talk on the icon of the Last Judgment a few months ago in South Carolina, and I'm going to put it up quite soon with some images of the Last Judgment so that you can see. And in that, I talk about the toll booth as well. But here, I think what's important to understand is when someone asks this question, is it to be viewed strictly allegorically, or is there a tinge of reality in it? Okay, so that's a really problematic question, because I've heard a lot of people say that they're bothered by the imagery of toll booths. And I don't understand why they're bothered by the imagery itself, because why are you more bothered by the imagery of the toll booth than you are by the fact that God is in heaven, or that Christ descended into heaven, or that Christ sits on a throne in heaven? Those things are, it's like the entire way we speak about spiritual realities is by using symbolism, because you can't speak about spiritual realities directly. You have to use the most immediate images possible. And so the idea of the toll booth, obviously those are images, in the same way that all the things we talk about, when we say that angels, when we represent angels with wings, or we represent, there's so many things that we represent that are obviously images to help you understand something which is invisible. And so the notion of the toll booth, I think that what we need to take from the notion of the toll booth is that there's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy of passions. There's a hierarchy of virtue. And in a way, I always tell people, in a way, we're already in the toll booth, right? This is something that is in a way already there right now, right? We already are ascending and being tested for these sins. And so the image of what happens at the end of your life, and the image of what happens at the end of time, it's already part of the world now. Okay. The notion of seeing it at the end is to connect it to an ultimate reality. Okay. And so I'm not saying also that that the toll booths don't represent something that happens when you die, but it represents the actual structure of being itself. It's basically a ladder of ascent, and then at each bar of the ladder there is a test, which kind of makes you, and you either go up or down. Okay, so imagine the Jacob's ladder, for example. Okay, the other aspect, which I think is helpful to understand in terms of what the toll booths mean, is the idea that life doesn't right? So life doesn't end with your physical body. There is consciousness, the soul, the spirit, the spiritual aspect of a person extends the body, let's say. Okay. And so that also means that the spiritual progress of a person, whether a person can move up or down in their spirit, in their closeness to God, is also something which is not limited by your earthly body. Okay, that's as much as I'm going to say. The toll booths are extremely contentious in Orthodoxy right now. A lot of people don't like them. Most of the people who don't like them, for some reason, I think it's because it's like they have a weird disjunct in their mind, where on one hand they can say things like, the cherubim and the seraphim singing around God, and then the second hand then when they look at the toll booth, somehow they're bothered by that, which is like, why are you bothered by one and not the other? They're all images. All right. Okay, so I hope that answers that. But seriously, when I put out the video on the Last Judgment, you'll get a lot more about that. Also about the notion that the Last Judgment, in a certain way, is something which is always present. It's not. It is something that happens at the end, but it's something that we can already participate in, just like the resurrection as well. All right. Okay. All right. So Jacob Russell asks, By the way, I want to give a shout out to Jake Russell. He is the one who is running the Facebook group, which discusses our videos and discusses also Matthew's book. And so he's been doing a lot of great stuff. I really appreciate what he's doing. And he's the one who had the best question for the last video. So yeah. So here's one of his questions. Singing has such significance throughout the Bible and history, modern, but what is that significance? What's the common thread? So 1 Kingdoms 10 or 1 Samuel 10 has a band prophesying. Paul and Silas start singing and an earthquake follows. The wall of Jericho, David, etc. There are so many examples of singing. What's going on? All right, and then Russell Prize adds another reply to this and says, and there's all the singing in heaven when we are given a new song to sing. Music seems to be a language of God we are born understanding. We can all naturally hear discord or harmony. It is as if music has direct access to our inner being and speaks to to parts of our spirit. Words do not. All right, so what's the deal with singing? Okay, I'm not going to exhaust what I think what music is. If you guys have seen the video, I did a video on music in which I kind of confess that I don't totally understand music, and that's true. But singing, I think singing has to do with pattern. It has to do with essential pattern of the world. And so our capacity to perceive music has to do with it's the same capacity that we have to perceive meaning and to perceive patterns in the world. And so music is something which makes us distinctly human in the sense of pattern, but also a certain notion you could call rhythm. Rhythm, for example, could be seen as let's say the basic pattern, in the sense that it is this, it's just rhythm is like a basic swaying back and forth, right? So that's would be like the basic rhythm. So I mean, and so it has to do with this notion of a regular pattern, let's say. I think that's the best way to see it. In Orthodoxy, we have this idea in hesychasm, for example, of a regular breathing, of how during the prayer of Jesus, monks will tune their prayer with their breathing, and so there's this regular pattern of inhaling and exhaling. But also there's also this idea in hesychasm, which your heartbeat actually at some point is in tune. And so it's this idea that you're breathing, your heart and your words are completely in tune in this basic rhythm of in and out, like this inhale, exhale pattern. And I think that music really has to do with that. And so this idea of singing is really this idea I mean, the word harmony explains it well, right? Is that we are participating in a pattern together. So when we sing together, we're uniting ourselves with other in a basic pattern. So it goes with this idea of a procession, or this idea of even reciting a prayer. But when you sing, it's even more, because everything, even the sounds you make have this basic this basic pattern in harmony. And like the commenter said in the question, there's something specifically human about our capacity to hear, consonant and dissonant sounds, and I think that has to do with our capacity to perceive and to find meaning in patterns. All right. Okay. So David Flores asks, in Matthew's book, he cites Isaiah 45:7 with God saying he created evil. Could you expand upon that topic? The first thing that came to mind was, by defining good, you simultaneously define what evil is. That's a really difficult subject, because I would traditionally in the church, at least, there really is this idea that God did not create evil, that in a way evil is a byproduct of creation. It's a lack, right? It doesn't have positive existence. It's a misunderstanding. It's a misalignment, and so that's usually the most traditional. That's the more traditional understanding. But you know, Mathieu points very well to the fact that in the Bible there are some very mysterious places where that's what it says exactly. It says that God is the source of those two. That God is the source of good and evil. And I have to say that I don't totally understand it. I don't think I could give you a full answer. What I could say is I could say that Mathieu in his book, for those who are reading it, the reason why Mathieu brings it up, I think, is very important. I think it's very important to understand the places. If you want to understand the places in the Bible, for example, where God changes his mind, where God says one thing and does another, right? And there are places like that. There are definitely places, for example, in the story of Jonah, God says, I will destroy the city. We interpret it and say, God says that if they repent, he won't destroy the city. God doesn't say that at all. God says he will destroy the city, and then he doesn't. And so there are places like that in the Bible where God says something and then he does something else. And I think those are very mysterious parts of the Bible. And they do have to do with this aspect of the divine, which is beyond rational, let's say, or beyond simple categories. But I won't go into that too much. I would say read Mathieu's book. I think he does a good job at about talking about those subjects in particular. All right. All right. So Quad 9363, in answer to what I said, he said, evil is deprivation from the good, but there are adversaries that work for God to complete his will. Yeah, that's a mysterious thing. It's very mysterious. What's mysterious is to try to understand how, let's say, the whole story, right? And so in a way you kind of have this idea that God doesn't create evil, right? But that in the end, somehow God is going to transform evil into something higher, like it's going to transform death, transform the fall into something that's higher than before. And so there's this weird mysterious aspect of, what is then the role of the adversary. In another question, there's a question later about the guardian angel, and I'm going to come back to that a little bit too, because it's not. I don't have a total answer for that. All right. All right. So Russell Pizzle, I don't know if I pronounced that right. Sorry if I didn't. Okay. What is your advice for Christians wanting to learn about symbolism? I'm fascinated by the writings of Jung and Eric Newman, for example, but am wary about immersing myself in them, anticipating strong links to the occult world. What is your advice about such sources? Where do you draw the line, if at all, and why, in your search for understanding? I tell people to get their insight where they can, in a sense. I don't read. I've not really read much Jung, and I've never read Eric Newman, and so I don't know. I've read authors that are as weird or weirder in my life. I've read Gnostic writers. I've read perennialist writers. I've read all kinds of things, and I feel like I was able to get something from them. But I always tell people that the best way to do it is to live in to live inside Christianity, right? To always bring it back to the fathers, bring it back to the councils, bring it back to the bring it back to what the church says, so that you always, you don't find yourself off the track, but I think insight can come from anywhere. It's the hard thing today is that a lot of times we need some authors that are going to help translate the ancient wisdom, let's say, or the ancient sayings in a manner which we can connect to. Because sometimes just reading, it's hard when you just read the ancient writers, because there's such a different world, and they have such a different perception of the world, that it can make it to come to a point where you actually don't know what they're talking about. And so I think that some authors, like I read Iliade, and I think Iliade was really helpful to help you understand what the traditional world is about, what a traditional, let's say, society is talking about. And so I would say that it's okay. I mean, I'm not going to tell people not to read Jung or other writers. I would just say to balance it out, to make sure that you're not, that you're doing it in a way, let's say, placing that in its right place, and not, and staying within Christianity, staying within church, and also coming back to authors that have some moral authority, let's say, in terms of holiness, I would say, especially for Christianity. All right. Okay, so Kat Leonard asks, I'd like to hear your take on the muse. Initially, the artist would draw his inspiration from God and then say beauty, but the inversion of that is that the muse, celebrities, draw their inspiration from what they think their fans want. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's very difficult, because like the celebrities, they're not, they're clowns, they're entertainers. I'm sorry, it's not. There's a difference between let's say traditional art, or a traditional vision of art, and the world of Hollywood, the world of entertainment. And so I think that the entertainer is, like I said, he gets his stuff from his audience, and it has to do with this upside down, but this upside down world. But I don't think that you could expect anything else, especially from the celebrities. The celebrities don't. You can pay attention to the celebrities in order to kind of see the sign of the times, but I would say definitely don't pay that much attention to celebrities, because they're clowns. they're juggling. That's what they do. They're juggling in front of you. So don't. Yeah, it's a circus. Don't get too caught up. All right. Okay. So Jeremy McKemmy asks, at the retreat we were at, I asked you to define hierarchy and loved your answer. Perhaps you could discuss it here. How do you define hierarchy? What is its ecclesiastical and cosmological significance? How does it flesh out in healthy and unhealthy ways? I mean, hierarchy is the way that the world lays itself out. There are different hierarchies, obviously, but hierarchy is the result of caring. It's the result of value. It's the result of mind. It's inevitable that because we are conscious, intelligent beings, that the world will lay itself out in terms of hierarchy. And so there are different types. There are different hierarchies. There are hierarchies of value, let's say, moral hierarchies. There are hierarchies, like Jordan Peterson talks about, hierarchies of competence. There are hierarchies of ontological hierarchies, and so let's say the spiritual hierarchy would be an ontological hierarchy. That is you have principalities, and then you have God, and then you have creation, human beings. So that would be like the highest form of hierarchy. The hierarchy, when it's done right, what it does is that it both separates and unifies. It both it both shows you what's higher, like shows you the distance between you and the highest thing, but it also gives you a path towards that highest thing. It gives you a path towards what's above you. Okay, that's the way that hierarchy is supposed to work. It's supposed to do both at the same time. Now, like, let's say the kind of postmodern vision of hierarchy is that it only separates, right? And so hierarchies are evil because they create, levels, and then they separate values from one another. And so it's like, if there's something in a hierarchy, then there's someone above you and he has more power than you and you have less. It doesn't mean that can't happen that way. Definitely it can. There can be hierarchies which are based solely on power, and let's just say strength. But I would say that, like, a functional hierarchy is really is something in which you recognize where you are in the hierarchy. Okay, so I'll give you an example. You're working for a company, and then you have a boss. Now, if the hierarchy is normal and you are participating in that hierarchy, right? You could see yourself. Let's say you're I don't know, you're a busboy in a restaurant, right? In a normal hierarchy, you should be able to see that the boss is letting you participate in this hierarchy. Like, it's your way of participating in the hierarchy, but you couldn't do what the boss does, at least not yet, right? You would need to work yourself up the hierarchy in order to come to a point where you could do what the boss wants, right? A dysfunctional vision of it would be, oh, that jerk, that, the boss is a jerk, and the only reason why I'm here as a busboy is because, he has more power, or whatever. But in a normal hierarchy, it would be, okay, this is where I am, and this is actually where I should be, because I don't know how to run a restaurant. I have no idea. I can do this. I can do the dishes. I can fetch stuff. And then once I do that, then maybe I can go up the hierarchy. And then when I do that, I can go up the hierarchy, and I can ascend the hierarchy. Like, that's a normal hierarchy. It's the same with, let's say, in hierarchy of saints. I stand here and I look, let's say, at saints, and I see the distance between myself and that saint. I can see that Saint Seraphim of Sarov or Saint Gregory of Nyssa, I read their lives, I see what they wrote, and I think, wow, phew, okay, I see the distance between myself and them. But at the same time, they're also, let's say, part of the ladder, right? I can see them as part of the ladder towards what's high beyond them, which is Christ, right? So Christ is at the top of the hierarchy, and I can see Christ in them as being what I need to acquire in order to ascend the hierarchy. One of the problems with the absence of hierarchy, and we see this in certain churches, is that because there aren't steps that show you what's higher than you, let's say, then it's like, let's say in terms of spirituality, it's like, it's me and God, right? It's me and God. And so what happens is that maybe sometimes it's like me and God, but then sometimes it's like me and God, right? And you see God pretty low. You bring God down to your level because you don't have that ladder which shows you just how lofty the infinite is, right? Just how lofty God is supposed to be. But if you have a hierarchy of saints and of angels that are loftier and loftier and loftier, and are more free, and are more pure, and have more virtue, then I can see, oh, okay, yeah, I'm far. Like, I can still be in a relationship with God, but I also have to bow down and know that God isn't my buddy, right? God isn't my, I saw a horrible, one of the most frustrating things I saw in Montreal recently. And I think I might have told you guys this before, maybe not. Every year in Montreal, the Catholic Church, they organize the tithe. And so they have these posters where they advertise for tithing. And this year, I swear this is true. This year, the image was it was like just dark, and it had a like a wavy pattern on it like that, and on top it said what was it, like, hello Jesus ... and then at the bottom it says your personal assistant is always available. I swear, I swear, if I could have caused an accident in on the street when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, yeah. It's like when you see that, you're like, okay, maybe I should be an atheist. Seriously, when I see something like that, it's like I have sympathy for Sam Harris. When at those small moments, I have sympathy for Sam Harris. All right, okay. So let me say it's been half an hour. I'm gonna go through the chat, and I'm going to, how many people are we in the chat? 18 people. All right, so it's not that many people. So I'm gonna take a few questions in the chat, and then I'm gonna go back to the Patreon question. All right. Okay, so how does the spiritual world connect to the physical? I admit, this is Aaron Lechtenberger. I admit this question may have a vast answer, but I'm curious of specific examples. Where would this be represented in art? Okay, so mostly, the spiritual manifests itself in the physical world, in the extent that something becomes one, right? That's the logos. That's the whole idea of logos, is that when phenomena is multiple, like phenomena is their phenomena splinters into infinite details, but there are ways in which things gather together in consciousness, right? And that unity is logos, is the logos of something. It's the identity of something, okay? And that identity is a spiritual essence, right? It's not physical. There, you can't find if you take a microphone and you take little parts of the microphone, you can't find the microphone in the parts of the microphone. You find microphone in the manner in which all those parts come together in their purpose. Okay. And so all of that coming together, that's how the spiritual manifests itself, connects itself to the physical. Okay. And so how do we see that in art? And I think in art, it's the same thing. I think that in art, you can see, if you look at contemporary art today, it does everything it can it does everything possible in order to fragment itself, right? To show fragmentation, to show irony, contradiction, mixture, monstrosity. All of these elements are what contemporary art is about. And so in a way, it's kind of deconstructing the world. It's an active destruction of the principles that unite things together, whereas a traditional art or spiritual art is an art between which things come together, in which the imagery is coherent, comes together, but also connects with a community, connects with the is part of a story of a community, part of the identity of a community, but then also manifests higher principles of unity, of balance, of and also it can be. I mean, now I'm talking mostly about, let's say, painting, in terms of there's something also usually that connects to a human level, and so, let's say in painting, the figure is something which connects you to a human level. Architecture, the building, is something in which we are housed. Music has to be music that we can engage with, right? There would be no point in writing music that had ultrasonic sounds in it that we couldn't hear, right? So the manner in which it comes together, but even music, like contemporary music, does everything it can to be as close to noise as possible. It seems to kind of explore that limit to with noise all the time. And so I think that's a way that things would connect. All right. Okay, so let's see. All right, so I see there's some discussion. Okay, what are your thoughts about the mythology around Christianity? People like Dante, Milton, and Goethe. How do Christians incorporate them into our beliefs, or are they outside of orthodoxy? I think Dante is, despite the fact that Dante is after the schism or whatever, I think Dante is pretty good. I think that we can get a lot from Dante. I think that Milton is more problematic in the sense that there's a kind of moralism in Milton, and there really is this idea of guilt and the kind of this kind of notion of guilt and the atonement and all that weird stuff. It's not weird stuff, but let's say stuff that isn't part of orthodoxy so much. But I think, though, even in Milton, I think that some of the imagery can be helpful for us to understand. But Dante, for sure, I think everybody should read Dante. It's a really important read. It's also important because Dante is right there on the hinge. He's there right on the hinge when the traditional, let's say, medieval cosmology is kind of breaking up a little bit, and he perceives it, and you can see it in the poem that he's perceiving that, and so he has to caution people sometimes about not taking things literally. There are some great parts in Dante. Some of my favorite parts where he talks about the cosmic spheres, the heavenly spheres, and he talks about ascending the heavenly spheres and then encountering the spirits that are at the different levels of the heavenly spheres. And so he sees the heavenly spheres as a kind of ontological ladder, like those toll houses that I talked about. And at each level are people that are higher and higher in spiritual virtue until you reach, the prime mobile. And then beyond that, this kind of beatific vision. And then he says in that, he tells the reader, it's not that those souls actually inhabit the celestial spheres. He says it's a condescension of language which is there to help us understand things that are too lofty for our understanding. And so, but I think that the analogies that he creates, in his hierarchy, is something that is very useful to understand. So I think that it's worth even like I said, even Milton and Goethe too. I think it's worth reading. I think Goethe really helps us to understand especially in Faust. I think he helps us to kind of understand the modern world and how the relationship between rationality and power on the world and the dangers of that. So I think that they're definitely worth exploring. All right. So Becky Diaz says, after watching your last video, the story of Aaron's staff blooming came to mind. I just seemed so clear to me that this is the cross, dead tree that brought life, and fruit that brings life. Yeah, definitely. That definitely has to do with the cross and with resurrection. And so you see this idea of death transporting life. You can know that that's what it's about because you see it in the story of St. Christopher. And so in the story of St. Christopher, in some versions, he also has a staff which blooms, and so this idea that he crosses Christ across death. And so, he is he's kind of death that's crossing life over to the other side. So definitely, I think that that's a good relationship. So Jake Russell says there was a time when actors and musicians were the lowest in society. And yeah, I think it's still the case. But it's just that the world is upside down. All right, thinking of the Last Judgment. Why do sheep go to the right and goats to the left? What are the differences that made them into these symbolic categories? I think that at least the way that they're often represented, I think a good way is that sheep are seen as usually being white, let's say, and also they not seen as often represented as not having horns, and the goats are often represented as spotted, and also having horns. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's something about ancient sacrifice laws. I'm not sure. I would have to check into that. I don't remember. But I think that that's mostly what it's for. It's also possible that, sheep are known as being docile and kind of following the shepherd, whereas goats are more rambunctious. Maybe that's what it is. That was Colin Miller. All right. Okay, so Colin Miller again. Near the edge and at the end of time, monsters and liminal characters seem to take over. When these times resolve back into order, things are sorted out more definitely. Is that a good way of thinking of it? Yes, I think that's a good way of thinking of it. I think that's exactly the way of thinking of it. I think that there's always liminal characters. There are always liminality. It's part of the world. And I think that in a normal world and in a normal hierarchy, liminality has its place, has its function, and it can play its role in a normal kind of setup of the world. And so in theory, that would definitely be the case. And there's also, yeah. All right. Okay. So Jalbers says, okay, so last time you talked a little about how Jesus embodies every aspect of the hierarchy from lowest to highest. Can you talk a bit about what the other two parts of God are in this hierarchical sense? The two parts of God. I think you mean the Trinity. I would think you mean the Trinity. I haven't really talked a lot about the Trinity yet. I feel like we're not there yet. For sure, the Trinity is not. For sure, if you told like a Christian theologian, if you use the word parts of God, like that's a big no. Like the Trinity is obviously one and many simultaneously. God has no parts. How can I answer that? So at least there are different visions of the Trinity. For sure, in the Orthodox vision, God the Father is our does I hate to use the word represent, or God the Father is one with the infinite. Let's say that there is the aspect that God is God the Father. That when you say, I believe in one God the Father, right? There is one God, and that God is the Father. Okay. Then everything kind of culminate. I'm going to be careful because we called a heretic. That would be horrible. Talking about the Trinity is complicated stuff. And so God is the infinite, is beyond all category, beyond all name. That's God the Father. And then the God's logos. So the idea is that one of the ideas to help us understand the Trinity is that for God to be infinite, it means that the expression of the divine also has to be divine, because that's a big problem. One of the problems of let's say of maybe, I don't know if you could say Hinduism, but certain aspects of Eastern religions is that the emanationism, like this notion of emanations, what it does is that because you have, let's say, the ultimate infinite, and then you have the manifestation of the infinite, which could be that we could be called the Logos, or it could be called Vishnu, or it could be called whatever. is lower, right, in a hierarchy. And so then whatever comes after that is lower and lower, but then it's seen as necessarily devolving into something that is bad. And so, Gnosticism has that problem. I talked about it before. Gnosticism has the problem that the way it's set up, it makes it so that the physical world is actually seen as bad. Now, what Christians say is that for God to be infinite, the expression of his divinity also has to be fully divine and sharing in everything that the Father has. And so the Son, the Logos, is fully divine and has everything that the Father has, but is the expression of divinity. Okay. And so then that's what then, especially in terms of creation and incarnation, that's what kind of fills up the world in the sense of this hierarchy that moves from God and goes down into death, right? In terms of the incarnation, that's what it is. It just fills everything up in that sense, and then gathers everything and brings it to the Father. And so Christ fills up the world and then brings the world and gives it to God in that imagery. So that we, creation, everything, can participate in divinity, can participate in God, can be transfigured, can participate in the life of God. Okay. And so in the Trinity itself, the way that people will say is that there's no hierarchy of essence. So the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are fully God, but they're not. There's no hierarchy of essence, but there could be seen as a kind of, let's say, hierarchy of function, where that the Father, the Son is the expression of divinity, and then the Spirit is more more difficult, like the way that they say that the Spirit proceeds from the Father. And so the Spirit is kind of like this opening up, right? This opening up towards creation, like this kind of opening up inside divinity. And then the Son, anyways, I'm not going to go too much into, because I'm not a theologian in that sense, so I probably shouldn't even be talking about this. All right, I'm gonna okay, so guys, let me see. I'm gonna go back into Patreon just for a little while, and then we'll see how it goes, and I'll come back. And no more questions about the Trinity, because that stuff, it's like shouldn't be talking about that stuff. All right. All right, so Muriel McMahon. Muriel was there at my carving class, my last carving class. She's really great. She is she's a Jungian analyst, and so it's very interesting conversations. So she asked, what would you say about the veneration of the Mother of God? How has that been distorted by emerging feminine or goddess cults of the present age? How has it been distorted? I don't know how it's been distorted. I think that it's interesting to see what's interesting to see is to what extent the emerging cult, or the goddess cults, the emerging feminine today, really hates the Mother of God. Like, they really don't like the Virgin Mother. They seem to, for some reason, find her very offensive. And so that's probably a good thing. It probably means that the feminine, which is represented by the Mother of God, is it's probably more complete and more powerful. All right. Okay, so Matthew asks, whilst reading Mathieu's book, I was illuminated to various blind spots in the materialist worldview that are never talked about. One example is how people in the past were well aware of divination and how certain forms of knowledge can come from it. In materialism, however, divination is presumed superstitious, pre-scientific, and false. Yet I have often seen materialists behave as if this were not true. For example, a lot of atheist artists. Could you broadly discuss some of the blind spots you think the materialist worldview has so that we can be more aware of our own perception of the world? I think the biggest blind spot that I think materialists have, and I've noticed, I've mentioned this quite a few times before, is that I think the biggest blind spot they have is that they do have non-material beings that they believe in, that they interact with. They necessarily do. It's just that they act as if they don't see them. It's like they don't see. Mathieu talked about this with me before, where it's like you talk about science, and you can't see that your theory is actually not a material. It is a spiritual, thing. It's a spiritual thing which holds, or at least a psychic thing, which holds the world together. And so I think that that's really the biggest blind spot, is that once we're working on this, like, I'm not pushing you guys too fast, but once you understand that consciousness is part of the world, and that we view the world through consciousness and through mind, and that mind is not only part of the world, but it's what brings things together, then at some point you'll start to be able to perceive things differently. You're going to be able to perceive that principalities are not so weird anymore, that the idea of angels is not so weird anymore, that the idea that there can be, for example, the angel of a city, it's not that weird to think that a city could have a form of consciousness. I'm going to start freaking people out here. It's like we're not there yet, but the possibility that there can be spiritual beings at different levels of reality is not going to be so bothersome. Like, I don't understand why people think that the materials always act as if human consciousness is somehow like either they act as if it's completely unique, or else they act as if it's a detail that we shouldn't think about it, we shouldn't talk about it. It's like we should pretend that it doesn't exist. But once you really take it into account and you start to see the world through that, then a lot of things are going to change. All right. So Bradley Ward says, help us poor Americans out. Is it Quebec or Quebec? It is Quebec. It is not Quebec. Well, you can say Quebec if you want. I don't get offended. I don't get offended so much. All right. Brad Ward says Quebec for the win. All right. Okay. All right. Okay, I would love Sarah Hardy asks, I would love a discussion on New Testament spiritual gifts, specifically healing. I've been raised around charismatic belief system, which is an attempt to discover what Christ intends for us in regards to the gifts. Have applied a very literal scientific method of interpretation. I believe that many of these people would potentially be willing to admit that they are not sure of the literal interpretation of things such as creation and the flood, but are hard-pressed to view much of the New Testament in the same way. I do see a difference in the old versus new. The new seems at first glance to be more historical in the modern sense of the world, a first-person account of events, which I believe accounts for the supposed need for scientific literalism within this group. Also accounting for the insistence is the need for Christ to have literally risen from the dead, because if that is not true, Christianity falls apart. I know, however, that this cannot be the only answer, because I am learning more every day. Truth cannot and must not be limited to materialism. Curious as to your thoughts. I am so grateful for your work. All right. So I think it's difficult. This question, Sarah, your question is moving in different directions. Let's talk about New Testament spiritual gifts, specifically healing. Now, is there such a thing as people who can heal other people? with prayer? And the answer is yes, there is. Of course, there is. The idea that there is no relationship between human relationships, between speech, between consciousness and healing is absolutely, for people to deny that, they have to be completely blind to how the world works. There are even residues of what a miracle can be in medicine itself. What people call the placebo effect. Why are you pretending like that doesn't exist? Why do you pretend like the placebo effect is not something that's real? The placebo effect is real and it can heal people. Now imagine what would happen if you would take that to the next level. Now imagine what would happen if someone could master the capacity, master the potential of the placebo effect. Like, why would it bother you that person could heal someone by speaking to them or by praying? I don't see a problem with that. Like, I really don't. I don't even I think that it's, once again, it's an example of materialist people who have to ignore an aspect of reality, which is there. You have to ignore it in order to make sense of their world. All right. In terms of the historical, literal, symbolic stuff, all that stuff, I think I've talked about it before. I think I've said that first of all, there is no literal. There is nothing which is not already interpreted. There's nothing which is not already spiritual in the sense that it gathers facts together into a story. Now, there are different levels at which this can happen, and there are different ways in which this can happen. And I think that what we have is the story, and I think that sometimes it's not useful to try to understand what literally happened, because I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what literally happened? We have the story, and the story has meaning, and the event has meaning, and it's a powerful pattern in the world. And so to me that's enough to live in the story. You say, like, what does it mean that that Christ was born of a virgin? Like, is that literally true? What does it mean? What's the phenomena of Christ being born from a virgin? Well, in the stories would talk about the virgin birth, like in the what's the name of the gospel of wow, my brain isn't working. Anyways, in some of the infancy gospels, there's a midwife who tries to check, to see, to understand, like to verify the virginity of the Mother of God. And in the story, like, her hand melts off, like her hand burns off, and it's like it's to show you that you won't be able to capture the literal part of it. It's just not accessible, because that's not what it's about anyways. It doesn't mean that I don't believe Christ was born for the virgin. Yes, I do. I do believe that Christ was resurrected from the dead. Yes, I do. But I don't think that you can capture that to the extent that you think you can in terms of literal, historical, descriptive reality. I've talked about this before. Once again, in the resurrection of Christ hides himself in his own resurrection. The disciples don't recognize him. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's obviously not just a dead body sitting up in the grave and walking out. It's obviously not that. Right? Does it mean it didn't happen? Yes, I believe that the resurrection of Christ happened. But I think that don't try to it's the point of the resurrection is not for you to understand the mechanics of it. And I know we're such materialists, and we think that that's the point of life, is to understand the mechanics of it. It's like, that's not the point of life. The point of your television is not to understand the mechanics of your television. The point of the television is to watch the television. All right. I hope that helps. I don't know. All right. How many more questions have we got? We're almost done with the actual Patreon question. All right. Okay, so Aiden Paisley asks, I put this question in before, so here it is again. Could you talk a bit about the rainbow, its traditional meaning as God's sign to man in relation to the flood, and possibly other biblical themes? And then the significance of its recent appropriation as a symbol for various modern ideological movements and trends, such as the spiritual but not religious, New Age, and LGBTQ plus, whatever. So the rainbow is... The rainbow is definitely a sign of liminality. Definitely, that's what it is. It's either a bridge between heaven and earth, or it's a bow around. So, like a rainbow around the sun, let's say, would be like a periphery in a circle, or it's also could be seen as a bridge between heaven and earth. It's also a peripheral symbol in the sense that it is multiplicity, right? So you have a multiplicity of colors. You have a rainbow. You have rainbows are not actually different colors. Like, they're not bands of colors like we represent it. A rainbow is like it's a flux of colors, right? It's all these colors kind of fading into each other. And so in that sense, it is a symbol of liminality. But it is also a symbol. So at the same time, the thing about symbols of liminality is that they're also symbols of protection, right? And so the rainbow is the sign that God will no longer destroy the world. So it's a symbol of protection, and at the same time, it's the symbol of connection, right? Just like Saint Christopher, the liminal Saint Christopher is like a bridge. Like, he connects. He's on one hand liminal because he's on the edge, but he's also that which connects two sides together. So too, the rainbow, for example, is liminal, but it's also that which connects two sides together. Okay, and so in that sense, especially the LGBTQ use of the rainbow is actually quite, in terms of the symbolism, is actually quite appropriate. And I think they know that because it represents multiplicity. It represents, white light or transparent light, which is fragmented into different colors. And so it's like it's an image of multiplicity itself. It's an image of multiplication, and so it does become an image of liminality. And so, as I always say, symbolism happens. It's not it's not a total fluke that symbol is used by the LGBTQ community at all. And so yeah, but the thing with symbolism is that it's symbols are neither good nor bad. I think I've said that quite a few times before. It's like they just are. That is, liminality is neither good nor bad. Liminality just is. It depends what happens, right? Someone who is ascending the mountain can be good or bad. You can do it out of pride, or you could actually be doing it in humility and coming closer to God. So it's like symbolism of the kingship is dual. Like, it's not neither good nor bad. There are good kings, there are bad kings, and you can see in the symbolism of the king, you can see both possibilities. And so, in the same thing with the notion of the rainbow or all liminal symbolism, it also has both sides. All right. Okay. So Aiden Paisley asks again. He asks, in your previous Patreon questions video, you outlined a hierarchy of variants of Christianity. Oh my. Orthodoxy, then Catholicism, then Protestant churches, then the splinter groups that go further out, all the way to the wildest, most heterodox beliefs, under which the vast array of fringe dwellers group themselves. At the top of the hierarchy, however, is Christ, who's surely above orthodoxy and also outside it. If he came today, he would be heterodox, not in a way that would contradict orthodoxy, but in a way that would fulfill it, uniting the whole hierarchy of those who follow him. There is an additional hierarchy of beliefs about, is this a question? Do I see a question mark? All right, okay. There is also an additional hierarchy of beliefs about what actually constitutes orthodoxy, ranging from there is no such thing, so anyone saying otherwise is stating something false, to one's person heterodoxy is another's orthodoxy. It's all relative, so feel free to pick and mix. To orthodoxy just happens to be exactly what my church says it is, end of story. So could you go into more details about what makes a particular doctrine orthodox and what makes another one heretical? As far as I can see, only someone who follows Christ perfectly could be considered perfectly orthodox. The rest of us are somewhere down the mountain of legitimacy, and our doctrines are only there to help us climb up to him. All right. Man, you guys. All right. Okay. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain why I gave the hierarchy of variants of Christianity. I think that's probably the best way to answer this question. I don't know if I'll answer everything that's brought up here, but it might maybe be the best way to answer that. I think that orthodoxy, the reason why I kind of said orthodoxy is at the top of the hierarchy in my opinion, obviously in my vision of it. There are several reasons. One is that I think that because it has made the mystical aspect the central part of its teaching, that is, the central part of Orthodox teaching is theosis. It is to be united to God and to participate in God, and that is really the highest aspect of what we're called to be. And so everything is interpreted in terms of theosis rather than interpreted in terms of simple, let's say, morality or simple, let's say, legal justification, right? And so, we get this idea in kind of certain strands of Catholicism and Protestantism, this idea that, you did something wrong, and so now you're bad and you're unjust, and so then, you need to be legally made just through the death of Christ, that kind of thinking. Orthodoxy steers clear of that, and the idea is really that the whole point is to be mystically united into God. And so that's our spiritual life. That's what the point of our spiritual life is. That's what the point of the liturgy is. That's what the point of the sacraments are. All of the things that we do are there to do that, to bring us into to communion and participation in God. Having said that, then also maybe because of that, I would think probably because of that, then the coherence of the symbolism is more preserved in terms of the, I think in terms of the iconography, I think in terms of the hymnography, I think in terms of the liturgy, how it's been preserved, but also like there's a simple image of it. Like, to me, there's a simple image is that at some point in the West, people stopped taking the wine in communion. I don't even know exactly when it is. I could probably guess when it is. It's probably somewhere in the 12th century. Probably it would make sense that that's when it would be. Somebody can correct me if they know differently, but at some point that stopped. And I think that it was a sign that there was something going on. Like there was something in the West that was happening. There was some changes happening, very, very deep changes that had to do with nominalism, that had to do with kind of materialism that was peeking through, maybe slowly. I don't know. And so that's one of the reasons why I see it that way. But I do think, though, that I think that in the Catholic Church, I think that everything is kind of there. I think that everything is there in terms of potentiality. Like, in that the traditional Latin Mass, I think it has, it has what I'm talking about. I think that there is also a mystical tradition in the Catholic Church that is very powerful, and that could always, that could come to the front and could be the central, become the central aspect of it. So that's kind of how I see it. I'm also obviously, it's also my own story. Like, it's like I went towards Orthodoxy for a reason, and it was because I found there all those elements kind of coming together. Yeah. And then I think then the Protestant churches just kind of come down from that. And I think that the fact that they oppose a lot of the symbolism, the fact that they were suspicious of the symbolism, suspicious of the imagery, I think to me is something that's lacking. I think it's lacking because of that. It doesn't have the completeness. Yeah. So that's kind of how I see it. But I like Catholics. I like Protestants. You meet in terms of actual spiritual life. You meet Orthodox people that are wretched and horrible, and you meet meet other Christians that spend their time, that love God, that spend their lives in prayer, and although I can say, okay, I think that there's something off in their practice, I don't say much besides that, because yeah. I prefer a dedicated Pentecostal to a kind of cultural bored Orthodox. Seriously, any day. Okay. So Jackie Rexford asks, how about the guardian angel? You guys want to kill me tonight. Okay, how about the guardian angel? What are the practical implications of having one, and how does it fit into Christian symbolism? Man, all right. So I told you about that question before. I'd forgotten about it. Now it's back in my mind as I see it, and I see time going through in my mind, becoming mush. Okay, so now, so the tradition. How can we understand this? Because the question we should ask is, how can we understand this today? Like, how can we understand the idea of a guardian angel in a manner which can help us see what it is? A good way to understand the guardian angel is that we have access. Okay, we have access to God. We have access to being. Let's say, we could also say in that way, we have access to being, and there is there are a way in which it presents itself to us, which is pulling us towards the good, and there's a way in which it presents itself to us, which is pulling us towards chaos, towards death, all that stuff. Okay. In the tradition of the guardian angel, for example, St. Gregory of Nyssa says that we're not only given a guardian angel, but we're also given a corruptor. And so each person has a guardian angel and a corruptor. The guardian angel is there to guide the person up through encouragement and rationality and reasonable speaking, and the corruptor, through passion, through desires, through irrationality, is there to bring us down towards chaos. Okay, and so you can already see what that is. Like, you can already see that we have access to that being, which is that being that brings us towards more being. And we have access to the being that brings us towards less being, towards more death and chaos. Okay. And so I think that's the best way to, at least for now, to understand the idea of a guardian angel. But like I said before, once you understand that consciousness is an essential part of reality, that mind is an essential part of reality, it becomes less weird to talk about beings, to talk about spiritual beings, because that's how the world works, right? So there are angels, there are beings that are in a hierarchy and that manifest different aspects of reality. They're principalities. They are, they're kind of, let's say it this way. Okay, this is maybe a way to kind of help. People are used to the idea of forms, let's say, of Plato's forms. What if there's an aspect of that, okay, the higher aspect of that they're actually beings? They're not, because they're personalities, right? They're persons. They're beings. They're not just abstract things, right? Because we don't deal in abstract things. We deal in mind, and we deal in relationship and in persons. And so I think that really that's the best way that I can explain that to you guys right now. I think that's the easiest. So I hope I'm not like throwing all of you off a cliff by saying that. Hopefully we'll get to a point where these things will be a little bit easier to understand. It's tough stuff. All right. So George Mililo asks, can you discuss prayer, Jonathan? I don't have anything that specific in mind. As far as question goes, I just like to hear you riff on it in your framework, and also maybe talk about how you do it, how you understand what you're doing while you're doing it, etc., and see what comes up. All right, prayer. I mean, at least in my life, there are three, you could say there are three aspects of prayer that I engage with, depending on, like all people, I have waves. Like I'm not a monk. Like there are moments where I'm, I feel like I can live in prayer, and there are moments where it's like, I just want to, that it's not, I just want to, I get angry, I get, whatever. Like just I'm not a saint. I hope you guys don't think anything like that of me. There's an aspect of prayer which is, you could call it liturgical, right? And in that aspect of prayer are the Psalms, the prayers of the church, liturgical prayer, all of that, the written prayers, as you could say, that you find in prayer books and that you recite in church. And so that aspect of prayer is really this notion of communing together with the church, facing the infinite, facing God, and participating together in this movement towards God, and kind of also this movement of opening ourselves up towards the infinite. And so it's also kind of engaging, as you're praying the prayers of the church, you're also engaging the whole history, right? You're participating in that story. You're part of the process, right? It's not just you. It's not just you and God. It's not just that. There really is this notion that you're kind of participating with the whole church in this process. So I think that's really important. Things like Our Father, things like the Creed, and then the different prayers that you find, daily prayers. I think those are really important. Then the second aspect of prayer, I would say, is just the impromptu prayer, which is also, the formulating of my own weaknesses, confession, like confessing my sins, formulating my own weaknesses, asking for help, asking for solutions to my difficulties. All of that is more in terms of spontaneous spontaneous interaction. Also, sometimes there can be some spontaneous interaction in terms of when I kind of have an intuition, like this amazing intuition about the world and about the Bible or about a story, and I kind of see God kind of shine through, or I see the divine energy, however you want to call it. I see this light kind of shine through the world, and it's like then there's this gratefulness which kind of explodes inside me, and I see that that's more of a kind of an informal type of prayer where that happens, during the day, or it happens depending on how attuned I am, in my life as well. And then there's the third aspect of prayer, which is the more mystical aspect of prayer, which has more to do with the Jesus prayer and repeating the Jesus prayer, but at the same time trying to avoid or to let the thoughts not take over, right? To be in the prayer and to be attentive to your desires, to your thoughts that kind of flow through, and to kind of hang on to the prayer and kind of be turned towards Christ, like hang on to Christ, but then let the prayer, let the thoughts and the passions kind of just kind of float off, right? And so I think that's like the third aspect of prayer, and in a way, obviously, I think that aspect of prayer, which is the more mystical aspect of prayer, is the highest form. But it's sometimes it's the hardest, because it's really hard. It's really hard to enter the heart, let's say, and to kind of to pray the Jesus prayer and just let and kind of enter into yourself completely and be able to be removed from your thoughts, removed from all the distractions, kind of enter into that. I mean, that's really tough. And it's, at least for me, it's something that has come and go in my life, where there's some moments where I feel like it's more accessible to me, and some moments where I feel like it's not accessible at all. And so maybe that would be my answer for prayer. I hope that's useful. All right. Okay. So I am done with all the with the Patreon question. Let me see. I think I answered all the Patreon questions. So, all right, we've been going for about an hour and a half. I think we're probably gonna finish this. Let me just check some of the chat and see. All right, so here's an interesting question. Quad 9363. You and Mathieu have mentioned that when you have a symbolic understanding, you can see the outcomes of things. But with the culture so far from the agricultural language, how is this possible today? I think you just have to look in the right place. If you look at the world today and you try to use symbolism of the meaning and symbolism of the center and symbolism of let's say those types of symbolism, you're obviously not going to see the outcome of things, because that's not where we are. But if you understand the symbolism of the margin and the periphery, and you understand the symbolism of loss of cohesion, then you will sometimes understand and see the outcome of things even before they happen, because that's what's happening. That's where we are. And so you can see, it's like, neither Mathieu nor I were surprised that Donald Trump would become president. Like, why would you be surprised by that? It's that's where we are. It's like, yeah, that kind of stuff. It's not yeah. All right, okay, let's see. All right. I think at least for now, I think we're done. There's some questions here that are a bit difficult. I don't think I'm going to go into any new questions by now, because also if you look at my face, like I'm kind of heated up here. And so I need to open the door that's back there. But if I open it, you'll see like the mess of my kids leaving everything in chaos. So right. One of the things I would like you guys to do, if you're willing to, is I answered a lot of questions tonight, and I might once a month, if I do these, I might post on YouTube one of the answers to one of the questions. And so it would be great to hear from you guys what you think was the best question or the best answer that was there, so that I can maybe decide what I would be posting online. So you could do that on the Patreon post, because I think the chat disappears when this is and when this ends the stream. So maybe if you guys want to, you can put it in the Patreon post, and then I'll post it in the next few days. Just to tell you guys, there is my Batman video is almost done. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. I think you guys will like it. And there is also some exciting possible news. It's not 100% confirmed, but it is possible that in November I will be doing another event with Dr. Jordan Peterson, and possibly some other speaker. And so I think that would be interesting, because a lot of things have happened since we've had a public conversation, a lot of things. And so it would be interesting to talk about that, and to kind of have a moment to express that. So as usual, guys, I appreciate, I think it's cool that you guys came on, and I really appreciate your support. It's been great. And I'm just going to keep plowing on. So it was good to talk to you guys, and I will see you next month. All right. Bye-bye.